The peat, when you cut it, it's got a smell off it, which is it's a smell you don't forget when you've worked with it. And handling it too, it's got a rough texture to it. Sometimes we would go down to the local distillery, Bowmore, again skive a class in school, go in and throw peats onto the kiln and get a bit of heat, especially if it was January, February time. They didn't like that because it was too much smoke going to the kiln room. Obviously to Islay, peat's very important. They've been cutting it for thousands of years. It's obviously been used in the whisky industry for hundreds of years. Peat was traded, it was an industry cutting it as well. It was the poor man's fuel, but peat was accessible to everybody. It was very important. The peat cutting, it's in your blood. I think it's passed down from your generations of your family. Obviously going to visit people, sometimes taking a bottle of wine or some chocolates wasn't near as effective as bringing them half a dozen bags of peat, which would last them a lot longer. But it is dying out, I'm afraid. It's more difficult to get access to estate ground or farmers' ground as they go down the conservation road. Plus modern houses, no fireplaces, no chimneys, so it is going to phase out naturally itself.
Often when people look at peatland, what they see is just the surface, and the surface is not particularly exciting to look at compared to a tropical forest, for example. However, what's amazing about peatland is mostly found below the ground, and I think that's why they're underappreciated. Most of the carbon, the huge quantities of carbon that peatland stores, is just invisible. It's below the ground in the meters and meters of peat that has accumulated over thousands of years. To me, peatlands are not just accumulating this dead organic matter that is peat, they're also accumulating stories. Stories about the climate that has been here for thousands of years, stories about the people that have lived and interacted with this landscape, stories even of the daily struggles of all the biodiversity that lives in those habitats.
In Scotland we have approximately 13% of the world's blanket bog. So this is a globally rare ecosystem, and we have the largest chunk of it here in Scotland. That gives us a really big responsibility in terms of making sure that we do the best to responsibly manage this landscape and preserve it for future generations as well.
I feel personally the happiest when I'm in a bog, whether it rains or whether it's a sunny day. I love being in these landscapes because I feel the texture, the colours on the ground. I feel immersed in this environment, and I feel both very, very small but also important in terms of what we can do and what we can achieve here. I think one of the things I like people to do is when they come to a peatland is to maybe stop and think and look around and to realise that the more you look, the more you see in this landscape.
When we're up on the hill and you're walking about, for me it's about being in touch with nature and really exploring what the countryside, should and could feel like in future generations. Degraded peatlands are a familiar sight on the hill when you're walking around the countryside. You might not have noticed it, but you'll pass these large black cliffs, and those are actively eroding peat hags. The work that we do on the hills here is an active intervention. We put diggers onto the ground to actively re-wet, revegetate and restore degraded peatland landscapes that are emitting huge amounts of carbon into the atmosphere that rapidly accelerates the climate change crisis that we're facing.
By restoring the peatlands, not only are we storing the carbon, it's really lovely to go up and see a restored area. The greens, the noises, the feeling of it, the clean air is so amazing. I can't believe that it's my job when I get up there.
For me, it's a journey of impact, not just on the climate disaster that we're facing, but also on biodiversity loss, and most pertinently for me myself, about engaging with local communities and supporting fragile rural economies. And the work that we do brings sustainable green economy jobs that will last long into the future.